Ladies and gentlemen, a sunny and warm welcome from Berlin, Germany to the rest of the world. Another session of our Virtual Ops 2020 season. Today, with a lot of buzzwords and fancy things, we're going to discuss with industry experts from the airline and technology industry. It will be a panel discussion, so there will be no presentation. And I'm delighted to have so many great guests with us today. So my name is Daniel Stecher. I'm Vice President Airline Operations IBS Software, and I'm your host and moderator today. And we have a bunch of industry experts all over the world. And I suggest before we start the panel discussion that we introduce everybody. And let's start with you. Let's go to Sweden.
Hello, everybody. I'm Anne Cederhall. I'm a consultant in the travel industry with a long past with various airlines and industry bodies and various companies. Hello, everybody. Pleasure to be here, Daniel.
The pleasure is on our side. Christoff, let's go to the US.
Good morning from Chicago. Thank you for having me. Christoff Poppe. I've been 30 years in the industry, 15 of them in operations and 15 of them in commercial and alliances. So I've just retired from the company and starting a new path of career. So I'm glad to be here.
I hope that only me has this Darth Vader sound, or has the other. Do you also have Darth Vader sound? Good. Okay. Yeah. So we have Star Wars team here. That's good. Hopefully, we have also Luke Skywalker joining us soon. Let's go to Markus. Mr. Contento.
Mr. Contento is struggling with technology. I was going to say, I'm your father. So Marco Contento, I'm based in Germany. I've been in this industry for a little more than 5 years. Since 1995 to be precise, working primarily in commercial space of airlines as well as airline IT and tour operators. I'm glad to be with you today. And by the way, I'm still trying to fix the background. So
let's go to Miami. Maria.
Hi, everyone. Maria Torres here. I'm here just because I got a spam email from Daniel and said, why not? Just kidding. I recently graduated from University of Miami in business technology and economics. And you can imagine that we had a lot of discussions on emerging technologies, how they're going to change the way we operate, especially right now during the pandemic, that we were kind of pushed into adapting to these new technologies. And I also worked for 2 years on Lufthansa Technik in corporate sales and doing various projects with customer centricity and innovation as well. So happy to be here and meet everyone.
Let's go to Austria. Markus.
Can you hear me?
Morning. Very good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, my name is Markus Puffer. I'm responsible for loyalty in IBS. Hope my voice is not as Christoph's, a little bit broken like Darth Vader. So I hope to be more in the Luke Skywalker range here. Yeah, responsible for loyalty. Spent my career in the aviation space with Austrian Airlines, 10 years at Star Alliance, where I did many wonderful projects with Christoff, actually. So we go back a long time. And also came across Markus, the other Markus, in the call, who I think will introduce himself in a short while. So yeah, happy to be here and happy to participate.
Let's go to South Africa. Emgee.
Good afternoon, everybody. Firstly, I'd like to thank Daniel, Christian, and Marco for having me. My name is Emgee Taute. My experience, I've had about 5 years in an airline in the operational space and about 10 years in the aviation IT space. And prior to that, I was in labor law. If any of you ever watched Up in the Air with George Clooney, that's what I used to do for a living, fly around and fire people. Now I fly around and fix things. So things have gotten better. So it's a pleasure meeting everybody. and I'm looking forward to today's session.
So you do what George Clooney does, and you look like Russell Crowe. I think that's a very good mix. So let's go to Canada, to Steve.
Good morning, evening, afternoon, everyone. Steve Bogie. I've, similar to Christoff and Markus, I've been in the industry for a while, spent the early part of my career on the operations side of the organization, primarily with Air Canada and its regional affiliates. Somewhere along the way, I transitioned over to an IT role, and for the last number of years have fundamentally run the operations IT functions for Air Canada. Recently left Air Canada, and now I'm doing some consulting work. So Daniel, thanks for having me, and looking forward to the discussion.
Let's go to Miss or Mrs. Disruption, aka Jasenka.
Oh, wow, what an introduction. Thank you. Fascinating. So I'm the founder of Astute Aviation Consulting, which specializes in modern approach to airline management. And what that modern approach means actually is bringing together strategy and operations, but by designing the process. It's relevant. That's why I'm talking a little bit too much. Process that can allow new technology to be combined with human inputs and finally move forward some very old and very inappropriate mindset for today's planning and decision making in airlines. So I described it in my books. I spoke about it and wrote about it on my blog. So there's a lot of it there. And I was a founder of a software company focused on providing the information about authentic cost of operation and passenger experience, which again has a lot to do with technology. We will be talking about today. So yes, and before that, I have for many years worked for airlines, for legacy airlines, low-cost airlines, and also for a software company. So experience is a mix of airline and sort of technology, but not much about technology as you would imagine with my background. And thank you very much, Daniel, now for organizing this kind of event, because in bringing people from all different sides of the industry and outside of industry to talk about their experiences, their view about the problems that really about specific problems, we really need that. We need to listen and learn from, lots of people around, because everything is connected in this complex world. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for having you with us. Let's go to Frankfurt. I think we have two remaining guys. Let's start with Christian.
Nice to meet you, and thank you, Daniel, for inviting us to this Virtual Ops 2020 session. And I think today we have the team of all LOB sellers from IBS on one call, which I think is great. So it's loyalty, reservations, flight ops, and finally, I'm responsible for the cargo business. I've been 20 years in the industry, started in persuading forwarders to load their cargo on our aircraft. So I worked for carriers. Then I moved to IATA to basically manage a financial service, which is called CAS, basically to squeeze the money out of the forwarders that the carriers have enough money to operate, but also driving the first digitization campaigns, which were initiated by IATA on the cargo side. I mean, on the passenger side, it was quite easy because basically IATA refused to give ticket stocks out. But on the cargo side, it was a bit of a difficult story. It's not only one document which needs to be replaced, it's 30 documents. So I was driving this for several years, also introduced or managed a working group related to quality management in the field of air cargo. At that time, it was called Cargo 2000, even though we already reached over 2000, and then they called it Cargo IQ later. And taking all of this experience together, I finally arrived in IT, where I thought, hey, I have nothing to do in IT, I don't know IT, But what I found out actually working now for companies like Unisys and Champ and IBS actually is that the cargo process actually defines how or what functionality or what technology has to deliver. And therefore, that's basically my job. I translate cargo processes in what technology or our systems need to achieve for the client.
Yeah, and another guest from Frankfurt who was already in the combined airline operations air cargo session was another Markus from Frankfurt. Markus.
Thank you very much for the invitation, Daniel. I'm here to support, I think, Christian on the cargo side of things, really, a bit less represented normally in these type of calls. I've been in this industry for 20 years, started off at Lufthansa, where I met Markus at some point. I've been a managing director of Truxon, the cargo community platform that provides data facilitation services in the cargo sphere. I've been working last at Uniload Aviation Solutions, where we implemented an Internet of Things solutions, smart containers. So I'm all about where can we use technology and apply it actually into operations and into doing things and processes, really. That's where I'm coming from. And that's where my strength is. I'm currently working as a freelance expert and consultant.
So roundabout, I would say we have between 300 to 500 years of experience here on stage. And I think we have also the variety across the entire value chain of airlines and all kind of fields. Christian mentioned air cargo, loyalty, reservation, airline operations. And just as a beginner, what is your thought when you are reading the top 10 business transformation topics in technology 2021, and then you read things like quantum computing and artificial intelligence? So which airline from all your experience is making use of quantum computing in order to bring passengers safer to their destination, or the cargo quicker to their destination, or to have a more loyal passenger after the travel? Who can name me any airline?
So I'll start with that. I think the most technological airline, if you want to call them an airline currently, is Virgin Space. I think they've got the most difficult job. They have the most advanced codes and algorithms and integrations in ensuring people return safely back from space, because that's a little bit more harder than dispatching a normal flight. So I think they're in the forefront of technology. When you talk about quantum computing, and I don't think that our normal legacy airlines and LCC airlines are there yet. But somebody earlier said that there's a hastened effect with the whole COVID-19, where we have 9 years of development in technology that's actually happening within 9 months. So I think Virgin Space is the front runners, but there's people on their heels.
I would say a lot of carriers are operating systems which are just as big as a quantum computer, if you look at those old mainframes which are in place in the data centers. So from a size perspective, they are at the same size. Other than that, I would say actually from a technology standpoint, and this is what, Markus, you can then add to it. I think from a cargo perspective, when we explain to cargo people what technology can do to them, basically they think it's rocket science. And it's not rocket science. What we are trying to do is actually to use this smart form in the cargo industry. And Daniel had once a perfect example, and that not a Nokia 6130, which is 20 years old. And that's exactly what's currently happening. And I'm happy actually, and this is what we are feeling in the cargo space through COVID-19. We are seeing this mindset change, which we already spoke about in different sessions. But definitely, if we look at the usage of technology in other industries, we as an industry are still far behind. And I'm not talking about quantum computing. I'm talking about the real usage of data, the real usage of automation, the real usage of machine learning, or even 3D printers in the MRO space. I don't know, all these kinds of things. I think it's all technologies which are there. And it's not about implementing them into our industry. It's basically educating the people what it can do for them. And perhaps then we enlighten them, and then they will see, okay, we need to do this because that will bring us in a stage where we are sustainable and survive.
Yeah, I think Christian's kind of hit the nail on the head there a little bit. For me, it's not necessarily about neat and cool technology. Quantum computing is, very interesting, as is blockchain and some other things. But, those unto themselves, if not applied properly to solve a pertinent business problem, is not actually going to help the industry and actually may take you down faster. So, I think there is the right level of technology, particularly today. As we look at going forward, it's about optimization, it's about stabilization, it's about confidence with the passengers, getting the passengers back on the aircraft. Things like touchless, all of that we talked a little bit about in previous sessions. Those are the technologies that are going to help us in the short term. And to be candid, Air Canada Cargo actually had an AI program, as did our revenue management. But the reality is that program did not prepare us for what we faced in the last 6 months. And in fact, it steered us in a completely wrong direction, right? So, there's, I'm kind of of two minds. Right now, we need to build the confidence back and then start looking at technology to, I'll call it, optimize or make the carriers more efficient as we re-emerge from this, because I think there's going to be a survival challenge if we don't.
Before I give the word to Emgee, maybe Steve, you can share a little bit the challenge of this AI project. And as far as I know, you're using a very old legacy system still also for your cargo business. How does it work to have a very modern artificial intelligence approach, and how to connect it with this very rigid legacy IT system? Does it really work, or was this maybe also the challenge that it's not working?
It's certainly part of the challenge, but for the most part, even the legacy systems, and somebody touched on it earlier, we are data rich and intelligence starved. There is a lot of data in these systems that we harvested out. Now it was a lot of work to get it out, and we moved it into a completely different platform to run the AI program. But it still really is about learning from where you've been and using that to forecast the future. I'm overly simplifying this, obviously, but what we've done historically is not what's happened in the last 6 months in either the passenger revenue side or on the cargo side. So people still need to put in the what ifs. And I was talking to a cargo carrier in the US, and here's some progressive thinking for you. They're already starting to think about overlaying sensitivity analysis around what happens when the passenger carriers start to scale and there's belly space available. What happens to the US dollar? What happens when there is a vaccine and they're not shipping PPE all over the planet on an emergency basis? What does that do to their business model? So that's the type of analysis where I think the AIs and the MLs can help, and obviously the data can help us.
Emgee, you had a comment.
Yes, I wanted to agree 100% with Steve. I've gone through this exercise with multiple airlines on using data, looking at things in a new, fresh way. And the normal response, and I think, Steve, you've heard it before many times, is we've always done it this way. And So that is sometimes the biggest problem that I have. It's not that we don't have the technology available. It is that we have an old mindset available where people either don't trust the technology or they just don't feel comfortable. And you can see that in everyday living. When people change Facebook, a lot of people moan because they're not used to it. 4 days later, they've forgotten about it because now it's the new norm. So I agree with what you said there, Steve. Do you have something interesting that came up in a conversation this week with another company? There's a big information and internet provider. Let's say their name starts with S, that is now also entering the travel space. Now, the way that they'll be doing it is they will be using their displays like TVs, will have apps. And if you're watching a program and it has a destination, you will have a button that you can click on. It'll give you information about give you the information about the setting where it's being filmed, and you will be able to look at hotels and flights and book your trip to that destination where you were watching your movie directly from your TV. That is where I think we should. That's where when you said earlier, we've got all of the different parts of IBS here. We've got customer loyalty, flight operations, reservations. That's where we should be moving into an integrated part where everything lives together and works together and is digitized. Thank you.
I see so many hands. I like the activity level here. That's really awesome. Let's go to Miami. Maria, you raised your hand. Now it's not raised anymore, but you are muted.
Sorry. Yes, I agree with everything that we're saying. I don't really think that to implement emerging technologies in aviation has to be cutting edge, has to be AI or something never seen before that is disruptive in the industry. But everything that I think we need, especially right now with the pandemic, is already there and has been there for some time. But as we say it, the most difficult thing in the triangle of technology has to be the process, because the people are there and they're going to change. Technology is ever changing, but the most difficult thing is going to be the processes. And I think we discussed this too in the VHH 7.0, that especially in aviation, that we have to make sure that everything is 120% safe, because in the end we're talking about aircrafts that they have to stay in the air, be it in the MRO industry and cargo in the passenger industry. The most important thing is safety, and that we get from point A to point B, no issues during the wave. So of course it's a little bit scary, or I don't know, risky to try something new, to try new technologies and new approaches, because as we said it already, we've always done it XYZ way. So just because it's new, it doesn't mean that we shouldn't do it. We should do it, proceed with caution. And that's why, even though the pandemic has affected everyone in the world very drastically, it has somehow pushed us to embrace these new technologies in some way or form. As we mentioned already, like the touchless check-in, touchless whatever. For example, I gave an example about my dad using the e-tickets. He would have never used that before because he liked the certainty of having his own book ticket with his name, his seat. But now he doesn't want to touch something unnecessarily or talk to a person unnecessarily. He will 100% from now on be using his phone, check in, whatever, grab his own luggage, because in the end, that's what we have evolved to. And from that example, there's many more of how we just started becoming used to new technologies. And I think that's at least a little silver lining from having to socially distance and everything. It has also made us try to think further out of our boxes to innovate in new solutions as well.
So now it's like a vote here. Everybody is raising his hand. let's start with Christian, then Markus, then Markus Puffer, and then Chris and Marco. I hope you can keep the sort order in mind.
I think
I'll lower my hand again. I don't like that order. I'll lower my hand. I'm out.
Christian.
Yeah, I'm coming back to what Steve had to say and about the usage of data. Of course, I mean, there are several topics here. I mean, we're talking about technologies and the usage of this, and I wanted to get back to this data point and artificial intelligence. I think Canada must have done a great job, because before the crisis, few months before the crisis, you introduced freighters again, actually, where everybody else was getting rid of the freighters. So that's an indication that, you know, how the data needs to be done. But what we experience actually also talking to our clients, we just recently implemented a revenue management system where a lot of integrated in the IT landscape. So you don't have to have it extra, you can have it internally. But what we are experiencing as we are talking to carriers, the beauty of anything related to data or data lakes, you need historic data. And what we found out actually, that the real benefit of such systems, you need to start collecting data. But what I wanted to mention is that a lot of carriers don't have historic data. I can only speak about cargo. This might in other fields might be differently, but coming from a paper-based environment where you have folders with airway bills in your shelves, actually, a lot of carriers don't have this data. So the real beauty of this data can't evolve. So we need to start now. And you were right. I mean, it's not about quantum, and it's not even about that much artificial intelligence. You need just a few algorithms basically and define what your outcome is, but you need a lot of data actually to fine-tune this.
Markus FLACKE, you had also raised.
I think it was, yeah, thank you very much for that, Daniel. I just wanted to support what Steve and also Maria and Christian have said. I think it's very important that we do not actually look for, you know, the so-called savior solution in IT really that will solve all our problems. Specifically looking at the cargo side of operations, where very often a clipboard is a modern piece of equipment and a modern tool. And I have noticed, I'm not sure whether Christian, you share that observation, is that specifically in the cargo operational side there is a, I don't know, people tend to wait for the next big thing and then they want to adopt. So what I do not see, and that's what Steve said, is we have a lot of IT solutions already on our hands and we can implement them and use them. And I think the biggest mistake that we can do is just waiting for the next hype thing. While I'm talking to you, I'm having in front of me the DHL Innovation Radar screen, Technology Trends. It's very important, it came out this morning. And when you look at things like quantum computing, something, or blockchain, it's very on the outer ring really of that radar, i.e. low impact, 10 years to go until it becomes available. So instead of, you know, trying to find the next big thing in technology and believe it will resolve our problems, it's very important that we look really at the collaborative aspect of our industry really and how we can share data and make that available, accessible. I think the future is really about system partnerships, not only IT systems, but really forwarders with carriers with airports. And in order to maintain that, really, you need to be able to exchange data in whatever format is out there. And that's the important bit, really. And I do believe what Steve said, you know, a lot of these items that we need for that are already available and hand.
And what is then your explanation that the available technology is mostly not used in the interest of passenger and airlines?
Well, first I was going to say that I should have taken my hand down, because Markus was just saying everything that I wanted to say, that we make the mistake of waiting for the next big thing. And this is really a problem, a very big and serious problem, I would say, in this industry, that you haven't got the guts to, you know, for instance, if we look at a customer data platform or do something serious with data, I find it mind-boggling that, you know, most airlines are, you know, not really innovative here, or they would buy something extremely complex and then they just sit on it and they literally do nothing. Coming back to what we said about this is the way we've always done it. Or another one that I love is, you know, when they say, oh, it's not invented here, you know, it has to be invented here. And that really, I find that mind-boggling, because you can start really small and make such a difference, especially customer experience, and data is key. And it's going to be interesting to see how this is all going to affect us. It's like I was talking to an airline today who told me about the current bookings, and saying that people book very, very late and they book one way, right? And of course, this is a completely new landscape, right? To what we've seen, and we can't compare it to historical data of a year ago, for example. It's extremely interesting when we start looking at revenue management and various systems, and how we traditionally have built up everything surrounding this, and how we do things. And this is where I see change, and some real good change, change really for the better. My classic is always, I say, well, people go on about thinking out of the box. Well, forget the box. Who cares about the box anyway? There is no box. Start thinking like there is no box. Just get serious about the stuff that you want to do. And I agree with all the others on you don't need I think blockchain is really relevant and can become much more so, because it can really facilitate a lot within e-commerce, for example. But I agree, you don't need fantastic technology in any way, but you shouldn't just sit and wait for it. That's what.
Thank you, Anne. So before we go to Chicago, just sharing some experience I made when I was visiting the SOC of United Airlines. I was really impressed how people could still work in the year 2019 with an IT system from 1964. So, Christoff, what is your explanation that these old IT systems are still there, and on the other hand, we read news articles about all these fancy technologies? And how much technology evolution have you experienced in the cockpit?
Can you hear me now? I changed microphones.
That's the Luke Skywalker sound. Very good.
So I think you have to look at this as an ecosystem. Yes, there are systems that are certainly legacy and antiquated in a core system, but a lot of work has been done in creating environments around it with extremely sophisticated technology and cloud and all the new technologies to support that. So you're trying to scale that legacy system to its minimum component to become kind of your core data repository of passenger information. Let's just talk about passenger systems, but everything else around it is extremely much more modern, and that is providing the company a lot of flexibility. I wanted to touch on something that was said before, and maybe try to be a little bit controversial. I think we're a lot of the diagnosis that everybody is providing, and myself included, most of the time, looks at how was business done in the past. And this industry is going through probably the most challenging crisis it has ever done. And we have to find ways to address very quickly some of the challenges that we have ahead. And speaking about, an airline not willing to take on an investment strategy, that's not an option anymore. Cash is king. Right now, cash flow is the #1 priority for any airline. So any proposal or any solution or any alternative that an airline needs to consider now needs to drive tremendous efficiency, immediate return, and drive down either fixed cost and turn it into variable, or find ways to bring demand back. I mean, those are the two major drivers. And we can think about a lot of leap efforts to transform this industry, but unless we find ways to add incremental value in the immediate term, there might not be some carriers operating in the future that, because of these challenges that we have today. And some of these technologies do offer an opportunity, right? Machine learning can certainly involve in an environment of uncertainty if you have the data. A lot of this AI technology can drive efficiency and reduce the fixed costs that we need to do. I think all of us in the industry and in the software development, need to figure out ways in which we drive components and modules and very tactical solutions to drive incremental change throughout this process. And we need to be adaptable. The environment is going to change. What we believe is going to be the future after a vaccine, something's going to happen, and the end state is not clear for anyone, right? So we need to figure out a way how to navigate through this. And you all have done a lot of change transformation projects. I wonder what is the right approach for that, because I think that's the dilemma we find ourselves in.
Thank you for this comment, because when I understood you correctly, you believe an airline should be open to listen to vendors who are offering them a quickly to be installed solution to bring down the bottom line on fuel cost, for example, because that's something which is necessary to keep the aircraft up in the air. On the other hand, having heard several times today already, we always have done it that way. Currently, some of the airlines might say, well, we don't have a high complexity, we can do this still manually. So it will be interesting to see which airlines are really taking actions in order to convert fixed cost into variable cost. So Christian, you had a comment on that.
I think there were others who raised their hand before me.
Markus Puffer from Austria.
That's what I thought.
Markus Puffer from Austria starts talking. Well, I think if you look at that where we are, and Christoph, I fully agree. You know, it's not about how we've done business in the past. It's about how we do business in the future. And I think what we see specifically from a loyalty perspective, and I think cargo may be similar, is that all of a sudden an area of the core aviation business that was always on the sidelines, you know, is getting into the front line because those are the only sources that generate revenue. The question is, how can that help survive, and what is needed? And I think what we realize, and in many conversations we are having, is that the fundamentals need to be done right. I think now many airlines find out that there's a fundamental challenge. It's not about the technology that's out there. I think you can solve any problem that you have today with any technology that's out there, right? Technology is not the problem. The problem is, as you have described, Christoph, how do you put these elements together that they solve your problem, right? Data is not a problem. We have, you know, we talk about big data for a long time. The problem is, where is that data, and is that data meaningful data? Right? From a customer loyalty perspective, we always want to put the customer in the center. And then, you know, what I postulate is that I say airlines know their customers very well. The problem is they know them too many times, right? They know Christoph 4 times. They know him in the PSS system. They know him in the loyalty system. They know him in the CRM system. They know him in a marketing database. And I'm sure there's 3 or 4 other sources, but those are not linked. So that's the fundamental problem. To solve it, I don't need blockchain. I just need a process change and a mindset change in the organization, and the rest will follow. With that, I think with that fundamental change, where technology actually is only playing, you know, a second part of it, I think you'll get yourself much better prepared for anything that is coming in the future. And I think we see now, the crisis is, for those that can think ahead, is really that, you know, that big change that allows that mindset transformation to start. And those that can afford it, that think into the future, will also take the investments for that. I think that's what I would see in that industry. And whether that is with blockchain, artificial intelligence, quantum computing, I think that is secondary. I think it's the fundamental transformation of the business, and, you know, attacking those sacred cows that are sitting in every organization that is happening now.
Steve, I think you were working at an airline which went through 2 major business transformation projects, making use of modern technology. Was it changing things for passengers and for the airline?
The short answer is yes. You know, those were, and just for those that weren't familiar, at Air Canada, we had 2, we'll call them mega projects on the go that in actually November, they'll finish the second one, which is the new loyalty program, the revamped Aeroplan. and the one prior to that was PSS, and that was going from a mainframe. And I think Christoff, you talked about the core legacy. Well, this, we had spent years developing outside the core. So we had a mainframe core reservation systems with somewhere in the neighborhood of 75 to 80 quote unquote systems hanging off of it to make it work. So absolutely understand what you're doing, and we replaced that. But that was really fundamentally two things. One was make it easy for the passenger, know your passenger, optimize your revenue. Those two projects completely revolved around there. The other thing I'll add is, and we've talked about it several times, and Markus talked about big data and the right data. And I always hated got sick of the term big data, because having whether it's a cloud or a server or terabytes of data doesn't really help you. It's having the right data. But I think I implemented an M&E system in the middle of a 787 introduction. And if those are familiar with that space, the 787 generates terabytes worth of data off every flight. 99% of it, to be very candid, is useless. I shouldn't say is useless, but it's, it tells you how many times the toilet flushes. That is not a safety of flight. That is not going to make your life more efficient. That is not going to ground an airplane. So it's getting through to tangible, useful data that can help you run the airline. And I think, Anne touched on outside the box and forgetting the box. To me, it's over the short term, and a couple of people have talked about it, it's around just back to the basics, is revenue, cost. And technology's got to be able to drive that. We got to figure out a way to better manage the capacity. And, that's a balance of passenger and cargo now. There's one belly on an aircraft. That's, you never ever want that to go out if it doesn't have mail, cargo, baggage, something in there. You want to optimize that single belly, a single view of the aircraft, a single MTOW, so you're maximizing passengers and cargo capacity on that flight, right? And on the same side, driving down, and Daniel and I have had this talk about, your crew costs, your fuel costs. What can technology, I'll just say technology, do to minimize those? How do you optimize your crew? How do you optimize your fuel costs, right? So I think you've got to get back to just the two basics over the short term before we get to the long term. I think Markus said it. There may not be a long term if we can't get ourselves through the short term for many carriers. So,
Marco Contento. Marco?
Sorry, I was on mute. There's so many Marcos, Marias. It seems like this is a session for people whose first name starts with MAR, at least. I know this is a discussion about technology, but I sometimes wonder whether we're putting the cart in front of the horse. And when we debate blockchain and quantum computing and all these things, it almost seems like all of a sudden there's new technologies that are dropping from the skies that now we're staring at, and we're hoping that they make our lives better and they bring down the costs and magically improve the revenues. I'm not sure how that's going to get accomplished, because the analogy is what Steve said, is moving off a mainframe and moving to Amadeus. At the end of the day, you're still doing the same thing. You're still trying to optimize your revenue. You're still trying to sell stuff. So I'm not saying that you should have kept your mainframe and that Amadeus is necessarily a bad product. Of course, it's not as good as ours, but that's you had to use that commercial break. So forgive me for saying that. But no, the point that I'm trying to make is, and this morning we had a session where we talked about commercial strategies in our sister forum, Res 2020. And the example of Netflix was brought up, and it's something that I learned, and I Googled it afterwards because I didn't know. They started off as renting out DVDs. And then they realized that, well, that's actually a stupid idea. Let's move into streaming and let's no longer have a pay-per-view, but let's have flat rates. That is a radical, that is not optimizing the box, that is thinking outside of the box. And I feel what we're doing in aviation, for the most part, in 99 of 100 cases, is we're trying to optimize the box. We're trying to make shipping DVDs more efficient as opposed to changing what we're doing. And the technology that becomes available, the barriers of entry are getting lower and lower because of technology. And all of a sudden, eventually somebody will come and will put those pieces together. And we as guys in aviation are scratching our head wondering like, whoa, we didn't see that coming. And so it feels to me like it's not quantum computing, it's really quantum thinking. It's challenging the way we conduct business, the way we interact with the passenger, the way that the type of services we offer, and then technology will be an enabler. But more often we're looking at technology to solve our existing problems. And I don't think that technology is the solution to that. Technology is going to make our existing problems maybe a little less problematic. But the question is, to me, it's much more about how do we actually avoid the problem to start with going forward. So to me, it's quantum thinking instead of quantum computing to really break down the boundaries or the boxes in which we are sitting, similar to what Ann said. Let's forget about the boxes. Let's really have a vision in place of what we want to be, regardless of which department exists, and then technology will be chosen based on what we are trying to accomplish. And again, more often I see it the other way around, people staring at technology hoping that it's going to solve a problem. Sorry for ranting, but I feel it's not so much the technology.
Emgee, talking about Virgin Galactic, so what's your vision for the airline operations and crew management world of the future?
So I would like to. So one of the items on, I think, the title of this is emerging technologies. Now I'd like us to remove the E out of that whole word. We should be focused on merging technologies of what we currently have, right? So forget about emerging technologies. Let's talk about merging technologies, because we do have the availability of different ecosystems, different integrations that allow us, and a lot of the people on this panel has discussed what is important now. It's optimization, bringing the costs down, ensuring revenue is higher. How do we do that? We do that by ensuring workforce optimization, better disruption software, which training optimization, fuel optimization, all of that's there. It's just not linked, right? So emerging technologies can be switched with merging technologies and digitizing it and getting it all into an ecosystem, even if it's different platforms, modules, or even companies. And I think that needs to be leveraged, and people are scared of it. And I made a couple of notes to Anne's point. I hear every day, this is not how we do it in this country. So you're saying, you said earlier, is very true. And I find that in South Africa, South African Airways, which we all know is in a lot of trouble. And I think they went and bought Jeppesen for a large amount of money. And at the end of the day, they still did their rosters with Excel, right? So you can. We have the technology to help airlines to reduce their costs, so that there is incremental value, as Markus said, for the passenger, because you're keeping costs down, you are optimizing your workforce. we should be learning out of COVID, because this is not going to be the last time something like this is going to happen. So the data that we use, and I know we spoke about the horrible thing about big data, now here we can use right data for outliers. So if an outlier like this happens again, how do we use that to use our current capabilities to ensure that there's an optimized solution for not only airlines, but also vendors as well as passengers. And just on the last thing, Marco, you mentioned Netflix. Now, I was in the US when Netflix still had those boxes, and that's how they started. They had those automated boxes where you go and rent a DVD, and then the next day you just pop it back into the box. Now, if we get to the stage where, and I see that Airbus has released, I think today or yesterday, they released 3 new prototypes for zero what's the word? Zero emission aircraft. When we get to that point, then we can actually start looking at subscription for flights, right? Where you say, okay, for $500 you get this amount of flights, just similar to Netflix. So agree, that's not technology based, that's thinking based, that's innovation. So my point is, and I agree, I think we're all on the same point, is we have the technology, it's not being used.
Christian, what do you think? How is the technology deployment vision for the air cargo industry?
I wouldn't even take it to cargo. I think we have REST people, flight ops people, everybody here on board, and I think and this is what and I also like what Christoph have to say, Markus, and I'm trying to summarize. But talking about a vision, and this is something, we need to get back to the basics somehow. Like how do I develop a vision? And I think a vision with view to how I use technology should have 3 aspects: a customer view, an enterprise view, and a user view. And not talking about revenue efficiencies. These are all outcomes. But when you really want to see, I want to see what can I do for my customers with the new technology? What can I do for my enterprise, for my company? And in the end, what can I do for the people which are working for me with this technology? And these 3 aspects should be looked at. And then I basically developed a vision, and based on that, then I can see what is out there on the market. What do I already have for technology? Am I using it in the right way, or etc.? I like what Markus are talking. We are all silos, and we had this discussion on another call. We had a whole topic about it where flight ops and cargo can come together, but also when it gets to planning and all these kinds of things. So that's why I really think we really need to get back to the basics, put our heads together, use common sense, and start really rethinking the way we are doing business. And what I always like is, honestly, when I see all these startups, and this I think is interesting, niche players, we see them a lot in cargo at the moment, that are people who have no 20 or 30 years in the industry. I mean, Daniel, you mentioned we have 500 years of industry on this call, but I would like to have somebody who hasn't been in the industry, perhaps going from another industry, and tell us what we can change. And I think that will have a greater impact, actually, when it gets to a vision, for example.
So Maria, tell us, what do we have to change? You are the youngest Kenny on the block, kind of.
Yes. So first, I find it curious that Mako mentioned the Netflix example and talking about the thinking rather than thinking out the box entirely, because just last week we were talking about Uber. Is Uber a disruptive technology, or was it an innovative idea that disrupted the industry? And that was a case study that we had in university. And I said, everything that Uber used to what it is now and what it used to be 5 years ago, all the technology existed. We had the APIs for the maps. We had the APIs of connecting people. What was completely that changed and disrupted the industry was the innovation of ideas that I, as a company, do not need to have a network of taxis or taxi cars or whatever. I just connect people who have a car to people who don't have a car and let them both take from point A to point B, whilst also having the map showing you what what's the route going to be about, so you have more safety features than a taxi. And that's not at all about technology. You could say Uber is a technology company, how as much as you want to say it, but in the end, it was the idea that set it apart, and that's why it disrupted the industry, and people are just taking that initiative into other facets of transportation industry, hospitality industry, and so on. So I completely agree with that it's the technology, you just use it as a tool, be it as cutting edge or as new or something as simple as just using Google Maps. And I think that's very relevant. And then another point that I wanted to raise for the panel, coming from what Markus said, is that if all of us here, or most of us here, agree that there is an issue with our processes in aviation that should be or need to be updated, why is it that it hasn't been solved? This is a problem that's still prevalent nowadays, because we're here around 12, 13 people, but I can guess and imagine that other people have the same mentality as us, that there is a problem with process. So why haven't we really done anything to change it and still talk about the shoulds and woulds rather than action items? What do you guys think?
And Markus, Jasenka, who wants to answer on that?
Well, I can have a go here. Well, I think why hasn't things been changed? I mean, it's simply, and I'm being very provocative here, but a lot has to do with job protection and silos. People work in departments that really protect the way they have always worked, and there isn't really enough. I mean, I hear it very, very often when people say, well, why don't you change this or look into changing this? There is this fear, there is this massive fear, typically within airlines, that if I do that, that could be revenue loss. And actually, someone said to me not that long ago, which is really funny, is that finally I can start talking about making some real change, because there is no revenue, so hence there is no loss. And I thought this was quite funny. That's my take on it. I also wish to comment. Well, we have good technology, but again, I think it was Emgee who said, this about an Excel spreadsheet. I've seen this so often. I've seen airlines buying really sophisticated products and programs and what have you, and they just don't use it. Is that that really, to me, is a training issue, and of course it's very costly. Why do you buy this stuff and you never? I could, if I wanted to, name 10 examples right now. And thirdly, I want to say, we were talking about cargo and optimizing flights and all that. What we also need to optimize is what's happening with those passengers on that flight. We need to optimize them. And I think it's really sad that we, after a flight has landed, I really should, with my data, see who bought what. Who bought what prior to the flight, what's their kind of behavior. How can I, not that long ago, I took a flight and they said, oh, we have an upgrade possibility. And I went up and said, yeah, I'll be interested. And they said, no, you can't do that because your ticket's too cheap. I mean, that's insane to me. What a horrible lost opportunity. And it's like I say, every ticket should be changeable. Every ticket, come on, there is a huge business opportunity here, and this is mindset. Now I feel I'm ranting on, like Marco was saying earlier, but yeah, some of these the stuff is really close to my heart. Oh, and I forgot, there is an airline doing subscriptions, and they do it extremely well. I think it's Viva Aerobus in Mexico, and it's like they want to be the Spotify of the airline industry. And I really like their program. I think it's super cool, and it builds loyalty in just a fabulous way. I mean, it's so clever. You just have your subscription, your annual subscription. Absolutely brilliant. stop ranting. Over to the next one.
Yeah, so I'm glad that Maria mentioned Uber, because I have to demystify a myth about Uber, because in fact the concept was invented in the GDR in East Berlin. So people were calling the so-called Schwarztaxi or black taxi in order to avoid the bus or other public transport means. Of course, at that time, there was no technology available. They were just raising their hand. I think Uber was just refreshing the concept by making use of an app. And I also liked your comment about technology and silos. For me, it's still striking that IT departments are deciding for another in-house development instead of going to market from a vendor where the product is available, can be even customized if required. And it reminds me from my good old cargo times, Chris Ahrens, a friend from the US, he was giving an interview and he was saying when he's meeting a potential customer who is saying, I'm not buying your system, I'm going for an in-house development. He's then always saying, instead of developing another new system which will cost a lot of money and will take a lot of time, go at least to my competition, but avoid another homegrown system. And that, I think we need more of this mindset instead of wasting resources and still being in silos. We need to collaborate also in the companies. But on the other hand, to your booking complement, I think if all tickets are changeable, some silos in the company have to give up, because what are you doing with the people who are working all the fare classes? So Markus from Austria.
Well, we mentioned Netflix and subscriptions in aviation, and Steve may recall that actually, you know, the subscription model was one that was, you know, actually discussed at Air Canada about, I think, 10, 15 years back already, and the previous CEO. So, you know, who was talking about the network access charge, right? You pay a charge to have access to the entire network in various forms. Why didn't that take off at that time? Maybe it was technology, right? That was not ready for optimizing the revenue and to prevent misuse of that. But I think, you know, again, Air Canada as a trendsetter came back, I think just a couple of days back with a similar model for having that subscription or flight pass model for Canada, starting, yes, I think, in 1900, right? So yeah. Are these models new? No, they're not. I think they're there for a long time. Have we been able in that industry to bring it to such a success as Netflix? No, because fortunately or unfortunately, I think there's a lot more physical asset behind that that needs to be coordinated, and I think that for me is one of the reasons why this transformational change is taking so long or is so complicated, is because we are operating in an ecosystem with many different stakeholders, and just changing your little island, I think you can do that if you're really independent, but I think most of us are not independent, right? We're dependent on ground handlers, we're dependent on other airports, we're dependent on an ecosystem of systems where if you just do the change, I think everybody else may have to change as well, and I think that is taking so long. So how can we accelerate that is the big question. You know, how can you make that change happening faster by being the first one is an unsolved challenge. We try to accelerate, right, by being, you know, as flexible with technology platforms, as capable in being integrated into those ecosystems. But I think those are some of the reasons why we take long. Plus, of course, and I fully agree, and to your comment, right? You know, job protection. You know, I don't want to touch anything that gets close to what I'm doing. You know, why, as a revenue manager, would want to give that up? You know, so I make it even more complicated, right? So that I think those are the internal hurdles we'll have to overcome.
From Markus from Austria, let's go to Markus in Germany before we go to Jasenka in London. Markus.
Okay, thank you very much. I'd just like to complement really what Markus already said to Maria's question. I think what holds us back, really changing processes. I think it has to do also with our industry. It's an industry that's been run on routines, really. And when you think about it, it attracts a certain kind of people. Hence, it makes it very difficult actually to change things. But I'd like to really emphasize on something that Marco said about, you know, the mindset, and it has to do with the mindset. I think what we haven't seen in this industry for a very long time, and that has also to do with operations, is real and true disruption to our industry. I think the last biggest impact that we really had were the low-cost carriers. We all looked, you know, at as sort of like the ugly stepchild in the industry. We didn't want to have that. Eventually, everyone adopted the way they were doing business. And I think the question in these days is really what will be the disruptive force that will emerge actually after this crisis. I think that's very important. And on the other side, it also raises an important point for the IT vendors of this industry. Are we providing more than just a standardized solution to our clients, or are we actually going out there and sit together with our customers and analyze what it is they need to do in order to, you know, be a front runner in this industry and to change the industry and the way business is being done? And I think currently what we're seeing, a lot of vendors are trying to get their products to the market, you know, and put a tag on it. It will help you. The question is that really what we need to go forward? And that, I think, is a challenge, and it will be a real challenge on all the IT vendors out there and the partners. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Markus. I think you used exactly the right keywords for Jasenka, because I was hearing disruption and I was hearing trendsetter. Jasenka, I think that's exactly the playground for your speech, isn't it?
Okay, disruptions, they could be interpreted in different ways, and as we know. But the biggest disruptions are faced now by leadership, by leaders, by senior executives, by strategists. They have no idea which way to go. Unless they work very close with operations, and they are not ready for it now. So what they can see in their management reports still are the aggregate data about cost. So they don't know much about where do they costs come from, why did they change from plant in operations, and they have no idea about what happened with passengers, what is their experience, post-purchase experience. So those information that are crucial for, we are talking about profit and cost and revenue, have been there for some time, and now it's just so obvious that they need to do something. So there is a way to do things and to explaining briefly. It's connecting, providing the information that actually results for so many interactions inside the airline, which can't be expressed with number, with any kind of artificial intelligence. Can't help there. No new technologies can't help there. This is something that is a combination of this, and the new process actually is starting in operations. It has to be the collection of data, not aggregate data, total data that they will see when it's too late to do something. They need to see what's happening now. They need to experiment. It's all about experimenting now. Strategy is experimental. They need to take safe to fail steps. And just look at what is happening and withdraw and add some new things constantly. And this can sound maybe difficult, but I don't think it is so difficult if we change the flow of information, the way the information is organized and prepared for people at the top of organization to see what matters, to see pain points. And so it would start, the data now only have values if they are looked at near real time and combined with insights. So we start with technical data we already have in operations, but because they miss very crucial information about passengers, and they miss very crucial information about why did about change in costs and what caused these changes. I'm talking now about changes made at the top, underlining causes of disruptions, to use that word now. Instead of changes, you can call it whatever, because I look at them as a positive. So once you have that, the data, actually it comes through reality check. That is the process that is missing today. Reality check actually sits between strategic and planning process and operations, and this is the place when you knowingly look at what didn't work. Not every disruption, not you need people who have knowledge, experiential knowledge, and who have a wide transdisciplinary knowledge as well, to interpret and connect all these things. And this reality check phase is actually validate the strategies that are made, because it will be all made on a short-term basis. There will be failures, but you need to know what's caused those failures from inside and from outside of the airline, and how to act, because the data they have now are linear, and they just don't know where to go, what to do. They just cut off number of people, employees. That's what is happening. Force departments to cut cost internally, but it won't last forever, and now it won't really last. So what they need is visualization. On the side of technology, there is some adjustment, some interface in operational application, and then we have this reality check where all things come together with human inputs, and then we must have something more simple and more to the point, to transfer this knowledge to senior executives, the executives who are taking care about the future of airline. Without that process, actually, it will be too many guesses, too many trials, and too many failures as we can see today. So this is how I see on both ends technology can help. I'm not talking about something imaginary, that kind of technology that is maybe already there but not used, and that is what I think should be the next step.
Thank you, Jasenka. Christian, Emgee, and Maria, you have raised your hand.
I think you're on mute, Christian.
Sorry. I hear now a lot of things, and the ideas are coming actually to my head, what I wanted to say, but I wanted to focus one thing. I think Marco said this, and this is a core problem actually the cargo industry are facing. What are the players involved actually in providing our services to our client base? And I think Marcos rightly said, I mean, there are other companies involved, like airports, for example, passenger ground handling companies, etc. And there again, we see a landscape where actually they differ. And perhaps we should also take how we can learn from different departments. In the cargo space, actually, this is being discussed because it's usually air cargo supply chain has about 10 or 8 players across from point to point, and how do these systems interact with each other? And I see this also in the passenger space. So there also is, and I just wanted to add to that, it's called One Record. If you have time, have a look at it, where basically we think about how can the data can be exchanged. In cargo, it's a certain, it's a shipment, it has certain, let's say, weight, etc., all of these values. But a passenger is the same thing. Age, for example, where he's coming from, where he's going, if it's a woman or a kid or a man, and all this can be used actually, and then improve services together. And perhaps also there should be more interaction. I don't know if this is taking place. I haven't been part of that side of the business, but in cargo, that's exactly what is being done actually. The different players talk to each other and try to find ways and means how we can let the systems interact with each other. And I think I like this approach actually with you know, having these where you buy basically I'm missing the word actually, and we could use this also in cargo, where you don't basically buy per flight spot shipments. You just have a certain tonnage which can be moved in a certain time frame actually, and you just book it along. But anyhow, go ahead,
Maria.
I just something that Anne said that just came into my mind about airlines or just companies buying this very huge or investing a lot in money of cutting edge technology and not using it and just having it in the back door feels a little bit of kind of what other industries are doing called greenwashing. I don't know if you're familiar with that term. It's very prevalent in the United States, which is we say to our customers, it also happens a lot in fast fashion like Zara and H&M. We say to our customers, oh, we're so green, we recycle, we love the earth, XYZ, look at all our marketing regarding of how much we're sustainable. And then you see that, and yeah, to some degree they are sustainable, but you look really into the company and where they are actually doing something to reuse, recycle, whatever, and it's minimal. It's absolutely nothing. It's a joke. For example, in Zara, they say 100% of this is recycled, and the label was recycled. The clothing was completely unsustainable. So that's what greenwashing. They say that they're green, that they're sustainable, and it's absolute BS. And I think that's also something that maybe these companies that are investing in technology are trying to do. It's some sort of greenwashing with technology, saying, oh, we're so digitalized, we're so cutting edge, blah, 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 we do this, this, and that. And sometimes it goes over the customer's head because we're like the regular customer is not the most techie person. And if they hear AI, they're going to be, okay, they're pretty, innovative. And in the end, in the back end, you see what Daniel was talking about of using legacy systems from 1964 or something like that. So it's just maybe trying to use technology as a marketing ploy rather than as to become more effective and more efficient, and using technology as we were talking about, using the right data rather than the big data. In many other cases as well. I've seen companies that invest in these huge programs and then not even they themselves understand them, but they kind of believe in them. And then you bring someone that has to not only believe in the program, understand it, but be able to explain it in layman's terms on why this is actually good, not just because it's sexy AI or whatever you want to call it as well. And I think that's also an issue of misunderstandment. I don't know what you guys think about that.
Emgee, what's your opinion?
So Maria, I actually wrote down a couple of things, and if I understand the question, I just want to paraphrase: is why do airlines not take up the technologies that are available to them that will make them better companies? Correct. So first of all, I've done a lot of implementations, as Daniel knows, and the first answer is going to be politics. Right, especially in the IT department. So now I've got a customer. I'm not going to name the customer. It took me 3 years to take them off on-site to cloud. Right, so they had 17 servers to run a flight ops system, which only needed one production and one UAT server on the cloud. But they had 110 people, and the CIO refused to move their on-premise to cloud because he was worried that he will have less manpower, therefore less say in the company. So politics plays a big part in some of the old legacy people, and it's always a big fight. So that's the first issue that I normally get across. The second one, and I'm going to be very honest, I think there's a couple of airline people here. Each airline think that they are special in the way that they do things. Nobody else does it, right? So when you go to them, it's like, okay, this is standard operational procedures. They're like, oh, but we do it differently because we're special. And I'm like, no, you're not. I've done 50 implementations. You're doing precisely the same as everybody. You're not special. So then, so firstly, they think they're special, so they don't need to adhere to or look at new technologies because they are different in their own eyes. Politics always plays a huge part. I think that Gessner covered the whole short-term strategy view of the IT department being in silo, not getting the right data to make decisions for future developments. And what could be future value within a company very well. Thank you for that, Jasenka. And then the third big one, fourth big one is, and I've heard that a lot, is we can do this better. Now, this is where the Kruger-Dunning effect comes in very well. and they just think that, oh, well, it's easy. It's a flight operation system. How difficult can it be? Or it's a reservation system. How difficult can it be? So those are the four biggest issues that I've had when I had to try and convince people to take up new technologies. So that was my answer when you asked earlier, what do I think about why people don't take it up?
Before we go to Anne, now I am very eager to know what Steve is replying on that, formerly working for an airline, who certainly believes it's special.
So, first of all, I want to go back to what Maria said. And Maria, just because something's from 1964 doesn't mean it's bad, okay? So let's just get that clear.
Oh, I agree completely, just so you know.
I think that's technology and people, okay?
Were you born in 1964?
Close enough. That it hit home. So back to Emgee's comment. So a couple of things. I'll half agree with you, particularly in the flight ops space. You know, I would say the core, when you're talking about optimizers, that type of thing, we're all trying to do the same thing. You know, I will debate we all live, depending on where you are in the world, your regulatory environment, your rules, and certainly your contractual obligations tend to be quite different in different parts of the world. So you need to find a hybrid where you can do that customization that you need to tailor to your unique circumstance. And certainly politics is a big issue. I don't disagree with you there. And the other one, and you know, we've got a couple of very big changes that Air Canada done recently. And I'll be honest with you, technology wasn't the problem to conversion. It was process and people change by far. You know, and the only other thing I'll add is, you know, back to our conversation, probably number 2 in all of that was data. You know, migrating mainframe data to any res system, whether it be Amadeus or other, is a monumental task that, you know, in our particular case, we measured the effort in hundreds of thousands of person years, not days, not hours. So that was a long pole in the tent, and it was very challenging to get the resources to do that while you're trying to run an airline or run the business. So,
Anne.
Yeah, I want to respond there to Maria. Greenwashing hasn't hit the airline industry in that sense. They don't buy systems to look, look good. In my experience, and you can easily find out. I mean, they may say that they've got a state-of-the-art CRM system, but of course, you quickly notice as a passenger that they don't, right? So they can say that they do fantastic merchandising, but you know, it is really rubbish. So that's it's probably easier in other industries to hide it better, especially if we're talking, you know, clothing, etc., what is actually recycled. Here you have an obvious interaction with a passenger who will notice that, you know, this is not so cool. You know, why is it cheaper to buy 2 one-way tickets on Lufthansa? And it very often is, for instance, Frankfurt, London. The passenger doesn't understand it, but you know, a lot of systems can pick it up and figure out that that this is obviously, you know, the return is more expensive, so they will buy 2 one-ways. And these are, to me, really flaws from a customer perspective. And I also wanted to say there with Emgee, I really agree with you, and the politics. And I've seen people fighting, saying that I've got more people working for me, and that means that I am much more important than you are in the airline. I mean, I've seen this several times. It's really tragic.
Christoff.
No, I think I'd like to complement a little bit the comment that was made. I agree that these change transformation initiatives are very challenging, and people become essential in the process. I think that the most important part of this delivery and execution at an airline is really engaging from the ground up, not coming out with some new technology that is a plug and play, even though it might work as a plug and play. It needs to be groomed internally. There needs to be a tremendous level of buy-in culturally to get this over the path. You need those early adopters to get the process. And I know I'm preaching to the choir, but it goes back to what Markus was saying. This is a very complex business. At the end of the day, the number one reason why people are not going to bring change, or they're resistant to change, is the natural sense of keeping the operation running. Keeping status quo running is actually the safest path for an airline to pursue. Our number one value is safety. We're ingrained and we're trained that way. We have to find ways in which this technology is incorporated in a way that the early adopters become the advocates, incorporating into the standard processes they have. It cannot be so much external. And maybe that might be the reason why there's this perception that homegrown systems are better because our people build it better. It probably has a lot to do with the fact that we run an environment in which experts seem empowered to drive change without realizing that there's a lot of opportunity out there outside their world. We need to find that balance, and people who find that, and vendors and providers that find that opportunity, I think have a leap way ahead of anybody that comes in with an external solution that doesn't necessarily get incorporated immediately.
Emgee.
Yes, I'm going to make a little statement that I don't know how it's going to go down, and it's how do you guys feel? Do we sometimes leverage technology to the point where it becomes a frustrating event rather than a helpful event? When I phone to make changes to my flights in the US, it takes me about 10 minutes talking to a robot before I get to somebody that can help me. Now that's 10 minutes of my life which I could have really spent, washing my hands, sanitizing my hands. Are we sometimes jumping to technology so quickly without thinking about how is our customer experience being affected? Because maybe I'm old school, I'm not even 40s yet, but I still like to talk to a person that can say, listen, this is what we're going to do, and it's going to help. It's going to help me. So the technology is good, but do we sometimes adopt it too quickly without really looking at what it is, what people want, and what it is, what a human being is?
I think, if I may, I think, Emgee, you touch a right point. I think technology can only be a facilitator, but at the end, technology will become, in one way or other, commodity. We all have access to that technology. The question is, what do we do about that? And does the technology give us reason and the ability to differentiate? And what will differentiation be? To deliver a more personal and more emotional service. So if that is what we can achieve, right, to give our touch points a better individualized and personalized and emotionalized experience, then I think technology is on the right track. Else, it's just a facilitator that will not lead to any better customer experience, I believe.
So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm really amazed. I would say that was one of the best panel discussions I've ever had in my life. I liked very much the atmosphere and also the expertise we have here with the almost 500 years of industry experience. I think merging technologies, that's maybe the quote of the day. And we are going to have one more session tomorrow. Some of you qualify for it, our 4th Aviation Women panel. And yeah, then our Virtual Ops 2020 season is about to come to an end. I think we had great sessions. You were great contributors, and hopefully the industry, which is in a very difficult crisis situation at the moment, is going to take the opportunity in order to evolve in a better shape and making use of technology. And as Markus rightly say, in order to improve the customer experience in order to get from A to B. So I wish you a great rest of the day or a nice evening, and please stay healthy and safe, and was great having you with us. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Daniel.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.
All the best.
Bye-bye.